It's been billed as Justin Trudeau's crusade against bullying, but his government's online harms bill could turn out to be the most sweeping restriction on freedom of speech that Canada has ever seen. Social media firms will be legally obliged to set out safety plans to reduce the exposure to harmful content. Platforms will have to have 24 hours to remove explicit and sexual content, such as revenge porn or child abuse images. The proposed law, Bill C-63, has provisions to jail Canadians for certain speech crimes. Anyone who advocates for genocide can face life imprisonment, the same penalty as murder. You can even be prosecuted for things that you haven't said. A judge can impose fines and even issue a house arrest warrant if they believe that there are grounds to suspect that someone will commit an offence. Author Margaret Atwood slammed the bill as Orwellian on X, writing, "The possibilities for revenge false accusations plus thought crime stuff are so inviting." Trudeau's Orwellian online harms bill. Meanwhile, the Wall Street Journal columnist Michael Taub has compared the bill to the film Minority Report. But according to the National Post, 70% of Canadians back action to make online platforms safer, but only 41% believe that this bill will be successful. I'll start with you, James. We've spoken about Justin Trudeau, obviously, a million times, you know, the trio that come on Mad World. But this is up for debate whether this is a good thing. And there are parts of this bill that obviously need to be addressed, not just in Canada, but, you know, in various countries where online harm has been, you know, is sweeping throughout different platforms. But do you think this is another example of Justin Trudeau being a bit of a dictator?
Well, I can feel the libertarian coming back into my body talking about this now. I've got some experience with this in the Department for Education in the UK as an advisor there. You have to deal with these sorts of guys. And different companies do act in different ways. We've just been talking about TikTok. They were very, very poor when it came to various trends happening on their platform. We had one here where they would start accusing their teachers of being paedophiles just to get the reaction out of it, right? That was a real phenomenon that happened here. And TikTok were useless at dealing with it. And you look at someone like Meta, and for all the faults they've got huge teams dealing with this stuff, right? They actually have, from the relevant authorities, real kinds of child pornography that has been caught from bad people, and they feed and train algorithms on it so they know what to spot, and therefore they can spot it and automatically delete all this stuff, right? It's a pretty grim thing, but it's very effective, much more effective, and frankly nicer than having teams of people having to look through all of this stuff all the time if it can be automated. So there's a lot of the stuff that these people can do, but it goes back to a French philosopher called Frédéric Bastiat, who actually Maddie taught me all about, who would say things like, you know, you convince us not wanting something to happen with not wanting the state to go and do it. Right, so the idea that a bit of legislation is just going to be able to do all this and make all the problems go away, it doesn't work like that.
No, and I think that the bill kind of, it's big enough that you look at one part of it and you think that's a great initiative, and then you look at the other part in the fine lines and you say, okay, that's a little bit much. But I want to get into this part where a judge can put you, you know, under house arrest for things that they think that you might say. Now that is a can of worms. How are they going to manage that?
Well, they're not, are they? I mean, short answer, it's impossible. But it opens up, as you say, a can of worms. I mean, how you begin to even deliberate on something like this. It seems like a very fundamental change of law that if they were going to go into in that kind of direction, you would hope that there would be some kind of proper public debate on it, because it really is setting a brand new precedent. It shouldn't be something that is smuggled into a very large, and actually I had a read of the bill myself, and what I found quite remarkable was that, kind of as you were saying there were lots of very innocuous, very sensible sounding bits, and then often kind of buried in quite boring legalistic language were things that you had to read them twice and be like, oh my God, they surely not. It's not the time to be bringing in some sweeping change of precedent into the legal system.
And when it comes to online bullying and it comes to, you know, child pornography and porn, revenge porn or whatever it may be, and, you know, trying to incite genocide or incite various language that should not be online, it is a good thing to do. I remember when Twitter was suppressing the Hunter Biden laptop story back in October 2020 before the election, and everyone was like, well, you know, critics would say, oh, you're able to suppress this story so quickly, but you're not able to get rid of all the examples of child pornography and all this stuff. And it's so true. You know, you do find sometimes these social media platforms pick and choose what they think is relevant to get rid of. So I think when it comes to an overall bill for these horrible things online, absolutely. Like it should be down the line. This can't be online. But I think that with that kind of judgment of if someone will do something, you can't really manage that, because I think that the people that will suffer are the people that have been criminalised for certain things, and they'll just be a sitting duck. A judge might say, oh, well, you've done X, Y, Z before, so you probably were thinking about doing this. And then there lies the issue that there's no kind of reform for rehabilitation for criminals.
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, the Minority Report comparison, I think, is really apt. It's a very, very dangerous route to go down. What you've got to also watch out for in the desire to push to get this stuff done is that you end up with different laws for people saying something on Facebook or on whatever else versus saying it in the street or in the pub or on a newspaper, right? You've got to have the same kind of laws on these things. And when it comes to incitements for genocide and things like that, obviously those things are terrible.
Yeah.
I kind of want people to say that if it's what they think, because we can flush these things out into the air and see some of the problems that we've got, right? That's one of the advantages of things like free speech. And the other problem of trying to predict when this stuff will happen before it happens, again, it doesn't work with some of the technologies we've got. So a couple of years ago, a black English football player, was a subject of huge, horrendous abuse. I think he missed a penalty or something. And loads of people replied with the banana emoji, right? Calling him a monkey. Horrible thing to do, very racist, all these sorts of things. And the Facebook algorithms and stuff didn't pick this up, because it had never been told that bananas equate to monkeys, which is what black people used to be called in a horrible racist way. Didn't get it.
Yeah.
So these guys got loads of abuse, but then you train the algorithm and it's, oh, okay, I know to spot those things in the future next time.
Yeah.
So otherwise you get kind of stuck in the mode where you can't make any of these things better if you just got a judge deliberating on all this stuff.
Just finally, guys, we've obviously spoken about Justin Trudeau before, and you know where we're at. I mean, he's heading into election next year, but do you think that this is just another example of him heading down a very, very left-leaning path?
Well, I think that it shows a real arrogance and a sense of almost megalomania that we've come to expect from him. It shows no understanding of the limits of what the state can and also should do.
Absolutely.
You know, the idea that we don't like this thing, therefore we will just will it into not existing.
Yeah.
We will have judges that are so prescient that they will be able to work out what someone's intentions are just by kind of looking and guessing. And it's quite right to empower them in that way. And there's no sense at all of like the unintended consequences that can so often happen when the state and the courts are given too much power. So I think it just speaks to the profound arrogance of the man.
It's kind of the new example of the invoking the Emergencies Act in 2022 when he invoked that. And obviously it was the first time it had been enacted, as we've spoken about in the show, since the 80s, or since it was even created in the 80s. And you know, he obviously brought it in to, you know, quell the protests, but didn't really think of the consequences of how this would look to his constituents.
Right, Canada's got all kinds of problems, right? It's got an even worse housing crisis than we've got here in the UK. It's got problems with kind of cultural cohesion. It's got economic issues, all the rest of it. The fact that this guy's only got a few months left in office, this is the stuff he's going for. Is he just auditioning for some other kind of job into the future and he knows he's going to lose? I think it's high time that he gets turfed out.